I didn't like fishing when I first played Stardew Valley. It was the winter of 2016 and I was playing the game non-stop. I loved building my farm. I loved planting seasonal crops. I loved talking to townsfolk and going to festivals and communing with my dead grandpa and getting rebuffed by a gruff man who just wants chickens. But I gave up on fishing almost immediately. It's a notoriously annoying part of Stardew. The fish bob up and down erratically. The rectangle is floaty and feels impossible to control, but you have to keep it moving, but not too fast and not too slow, and hopefully, eventually, the experience will be over. Now I find fishing one of the most satisfying things I can do in a game. You show me fishing, I'll show you a game that goes to the top of my to-play list. And the thing that changed my mind about it was Ernest Hemingway. Even if you know basically nothing about Hemingway, you might still associate him with fishing because he very much made it the Hemingway brand. Or you might know him for being famously kind of a bad man, something I can't excuse because it's none of my business. We all have to figure out our own relationships with famous dead white men. And for me, the way I've always felt about Hemingway is that he is dead. I won. Nothing he can say can hurt me. That being said, when I first read Hemingway, I felt the same way about him that I did about fishing in Stardew Valley. I found his writing frustrating, inaccessible, and pointless.
Nick looked down into the pool from the bridge. It was a hot day. A kingfisher flew up the stream. It was a long time since Nick had looked into a stream and seen trout.
Why am I doing this crappy thing when I could be doing literally anything else? But I kept pushing through, and I started to appreciate his rhythmic, repetitive writing, as rhythmic and repetitive as fishing in video games. A lot of these games take you through the same series of actions over and over again. Davide Aversa identified them on GameDeveloper.com. The lure, the bite, and the catch. You cast your line. The lure hits the water with a splash, and you wait. In some games, there's a nibble, and you know what that means. You keep waiting, and waiting, and waiting. A bite. You snap into action. You're managing the tension of the line, or furiously tapping, or modulating your button presses to keep this goddamn rectangle behind the fish icon, and whatever else you might be thinking of. Saving Hyrule, avenging your family, restoring the town, is gone. When the cycle is complete, you feel proud, or real ticked off, or ready to go again. These emotions run through the many, many fishing stories written by Hemingway. And much like these games, Hemingway insists that fishing adheres to a proper series of actions. Here's an example from The Sun Also Rises.
He took the trout ashore, washed them in the cool, smoothly heavy water above the dam, and then picked some ferns and packed them all in the bag. 3 trout on a layer of ferns, then another layer of ferns, then 3 more trout, and then covered them in ferns. They looked nice in the ferns.
And in Big Two-Hearted River, Nick Adams sets up his tent in the Michigan wilderness. He makes coffee. He collects grasshoppers for bait. And he fishes. The story is a series of descriptions of a man accomplishing small tasks with precision. On its surface, that's all it is, because Hemingway uses descriptions of tasks and actions to point at emotional turmoil without saying it explicitly. He compared the style of writing to an iceberg, where 90% of the meaning is hidden below the water, omitted from the text, but definitely there. The descriptions of Nick fishing and taking in the Michigan wilderness is the top of the iceberg. Underneath, the bit that we don't see, is his PTSD from serving in World War I. Nick's friend, who told him how to make coffee, is dead. The other friends he used to fish with might be dead. We don't know. Nick isn't thinking about it. Nick is thinking about building a fire and eating hot beans from a tin plate, making sure to wet his hands before he touches a trout, because if he doesn't, they'll grow a white fungus and die. Learning to appreciate that whole iceberg is what brought me around on Hemingway. I found out that underneath the hyper-masculine ice cap, he was an insecure and messy bitch who loved drama. I also started to appreciate the way that he describes doing things to avoid feeling things. I'm the same way. Character development. I think fishing in games has a similar function, taking us to this soothing and repetitive place. In Moonglow Bay, when you stock up on bait, low or high quality, and pack up your rods, strong, agile, or poise, and choose your lure, jig, spinner, or plug, and putter off in your tugboat into the blue sea, you will catch fish. What you catch depends on where you are, the depth of the water, the weather, or the time of day. In the glaciers, you'll find ice lobster or Atlantic blues, and on a rainy day, you can catch boxer shrimp. Later, when you buy a dinghy small enough, you can motor into the thermal geysers and trap strange crabs, curled fin tuna, and rice fish. The pages in your journal fill with colorful images of fish and notes on how and where you might catch them, and the rods and lures you need to correctly repeat the feat. New fish can be donated to the aquarium, fish can be cooked into dozens of dishes or sold whole in a vending machine, and every day there is a reason to go to sea. Every day there is something to do. Just like Nick Adams is fulfilled by a neat camp and his bottle of grasshoppers, Moonglow Bay rewards choosing the right equipment and properly crafting bait. It's not a hard game, but it's a methodical and contemplative one, and its emotional core, just like Big Two-Hearted River, is loss. The main character is emerging from a stupor of grief after their partner has gone missing at sea. As Nick Adams knows, the best way to cope is to find something to do. It's similar to this year's Dredge, a breakout indie title that puts a horror twist on fishing. In Dredge, you arrange fish and engine parts in your boat, Resident Evil style. Your inventory can only hold so much, and what you can't hold, you have to drop into the sea. But underneath all the spooky fishing and fleeing from eldritch horrors is a darker plot. The mysterious death of a woman, and of course, the misery of a town that's just a frickin' bad place to live. Look at this! How am I supposed to put up with this? Dredge's gameplay, for what it's worth, does take a different tack from the other games I've talked about. Instead of waiting for a bite, fishing involves hitting buttons at specific intervals to bring your rod to the surface. It reminds me of rhythm games, and still echoes the theme common in all these fishing stories. Precision is key. By the time I started my second Stardew Valley playthrough, I was totally Hemingway-pilled, and I had a tradition: making Hemingway my playable avatar in any game with character customization. It's really easy because he was a white man with brown hair. Anyway, Stardew Valley seemed like a natural fit. But I knew deep in my bones that if I played it as Hemingway, eventually I would need to fish. And maybe not romance Shane. Damned if I can stay away from that man. I held out as long as I could. I turned my meticulous Hemingway focus to the upkeep of my farm. I planted neat rows of crops. I purchased a chicken coop, then a barn. I named all of my animals after Hemingway's cats. He had about 40 cats. I made a lot of beer and wine. I reached the bottom of the mines. I fixed the bus to Calico Desert. I opened the quarry and I restored most of the community center. But I did not remove the glittering boulder, which is the reward for completing the fish bundles. And then I was sort of done. My farm basically ran itself. My relationships were growing and the community center was looking nice, except for the broken fish tank. Fishing had become my iceberg, the thing I was avoiding, but now I had no horizons left. I had to learn how to fish. Anyone who has ever complained about fishing in Stardew Valley has been told this: it gets easier the more you do it. Which is true of most things, but also mechanically fishing gets easier as you level up. But you gotta put in the time, and that time sucks ass. For me, there was a ray of hope. People on the internet say it's possible to grind your fish skill by catching trash. So this is what I did. Every single day in game, I went to my pond and I caught a bit of trash. I was diligent, I was deranged, I might have been a little bit depressed, I don't know what was going on, but I bent my rod to this boring task over and over again. By catching trash, I squeaked my way to fishing level 2, and guess what? Fishing didn't get easier. But I had gotten better at it. Suddenly I was catching perch and bream and fucking sardines. You don't even need them for community center bundles, but I was catching them. I feel like my appreciation for Hemingway, dense writing and all, had given me the patience and the drive to do a task that had felt repetitive and frustrating. I had pushed through that frustration with his writing and found something really special in it, a way of seeing the world that I grew to love, even in his lengthy descriptions. And then I started finding the joy in fishing. It's the pleasure of tapping at just the right time, pulling a fish from the water, having a task, and doing it well. And screaming because the glacier fish is a bastard. Stop bouncing, please. I am just here to have a good time. What you catch? What you catch. What you catch depends on where you are, the depth of the water, the big truck outside.
Honk honk.
Zoom zoom.